Hello and welcome to our next community conference session. This is expanding your agency's capacity through fee for service. My name is Claire Weatherby and I am with the ICF technical assistance team. If you have any technical issues today with Zoom, please put those in the chat box and send your message to the host. We will help get you sorted out. And if you have any content-related questions, please put those in the Q&A box. We will be answering those in writing throughout the session, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers to the panelists. So we want to know what you're thinking and what you'd like to know more about. We are going to start today with a bit of Mentimeter, so you can open that browser right back up. It is the same one we've been using, and I will also grab this information and drop it in the chat for you. So you've got your URL, and then you can alternatively go to menti.com and use that code 2861445. So I see folks are getting in and dropping your answers in. Our first question is, does your agency have a lender fee for service structure that it uses for pre-purchase education and counseling services? So we just kind of want to get a sense from you where you're at. Looks like some of you actually do have fee for service already, which is awesome. Some of you don't have it yet, but will be implementing soon. And then a bunch of you don't have one, maybe also not yet. So we're going to be hearing from some great speakers today who will talk about the latest developments in this area, including a local agency who is already doing this and can give some really helpful advice about how to get started. So thanks for your answers. And yeah, it looks like folks are still trickling in. So I'll let you go for a minute here and keep answering the question, but I think looks like we've got our theme. Most of you don't have fee for service, some do, and some are planning on it. Maybe we can go to the next question, Taylor. So we also would like to know, what are your agency's concerns about implementing lender fee for service, if you have any? So I know a lot of folks don't have fee for service yet, but we'd like to know, maybe you are not sure how much to charge. Talk about that today. Maybe you're concerned about, how do I avoid potential conflicts of interest if we're receiving funding from specific lenders? Some folks might be interested in knowing, how do you track the fees and avoid double billing with the HUD grant, kind of sorting out the back end finances. And then it looks like a bunch of you are just not sure where to start. So this is a good place to start. And yeah, okay, so we've got kind of a mix of answers here. Looks like there's kind of some folks that have any number of these questions, and maybe some of you have multiple questions, and maybe also some of you are already off to the races. So thanks for sharing where you are. And I think we'll go back to the slides. And I would like to hand it over to Karen Hoskins, who is going to be your moderator today. You're in good hands. Karen, take it away.
Thanks, Claire. So hello, everyone. Again, my name is Karen Hoskins, and I am a lead housing counseling specialist and consultant with the ICF team. So as Claire said, today we'll be examining the current industry status on the topic of lender fee for service. And as many of you are aware, fee for service is not a new conversation. Those of us who have been around the housing counseling industry for some time will remember that these conversations span more than 10 years even. However, progress is being made like never before, and we'll get an update on the status. But before we begin, let's take a look at our agenda. We'll be learning more about the Homeownership Partnership Integration Initiative. It's a fee-for-service pilot. Also, the state of fee-for-service today, or where the industry is currently on this topic. And then the executive director of Housing and Education Alliance in Tampa, Florida, is here to share their agency's experience with fee-for-service. We will allow some time at the end for questions from the audience. So if you do have a question as we go along and you hear from the speakers, be sure to post that to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our speakers are Megan McCarthy, who is Vice President of Affordable Housing and Consumer Empowerment with the Housing Partnership Network. Also here, Lot Diaz, Vice President, Housing and Financial Empowerment of Housing and Financial Empowerment at Unidos US. And then finally, Sylvia Alvarez is Executive Director of Housing and Education of the Housing and Education Alliance. So that's those are our speakers, and we look forward to hearing from them. So to get our conversation started, Megan McCarthy, again, from Housing Partnership Network. So Megan, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for having me today to talk a little bit about the Homeownership Partnership Integration Initiative, and in particular, our fee-for-service pilot. So HPII really is an endeavor by several HUD housing counseling intermediaries and the National Housing Resource Center to really think about ways to come together and advance a number of objectives, but primary among them is getting more households engaged in housing counseling. And as the integration piece of HPII stands for, really integrating housing counseling into the homeownership and origination process so that families can achieve homeownership that is sustained over time. By bringing these groups together, we really also wanted to, increase standardization across housing counseling agencies, and through things like fee-for-service, increase the financial sustainability of the housing counseling sector. So bringing more forms and sources of revenues to organizations to continue and expand the work that they do. So we came together as a group to develop a set of recommendations that we hoped could be shared across the housing counseling sector, and create a pathway for partnerships between housing counseling agencies and the mortgage finance sector, really two groups that are critical to the success of families who want to achieve and sustain homeownership. So I'm not going to share all of the organizations if you want to flip to the next slide, but these are the members of the HPII Steering Committee, which for over a year really worked together to develop these series of recommendations. And I think it was really important to note the group that came together, really working in a collaborative way to be able to come up with recommendations that a broad number of organizations could support and hopefully be adopted. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the process here. So this steering committee for over a year really met together as a large group, but then there were also two working groups. One focused on resident revenue diversity, and that really was focused on fee-for-service. The other, which I'm not going to talk as much about, is about looking for a data platform, exploring how we might use technology to facilitate data aggregation, as well as exchange between counseling agencies and lenders. And part of this is about finding a way to follow clients after they leave the housing counseling process through a technology solution. So we approach this work by first, obviously, coming together, but also conducting surveys and interviews with lenders, researchers, technology providers, and of course, housing counseling organizations. And the goal with all this work is to really understand the technology solutions that were already being used, fee-for-service arrangements that organizations already have, and in particular to get the perspective of lenders on working with housing counseling organizations. So what worked, what were some of the challenges, what would encourage them to enter into more partnerships, and what were things that might be standing in the way. And we really used all of this information to develop a series of recommendations to help advance these two pieces of work around fee-for-service and data and technology. So ultimately, we came up with three recommendations. The first is really to create an advisory council that would continue to oversee and advance these two areas of work. And we wanted to expand beyond the counseling sector to also invite lenders and investors and research and policy representatives into the conversation. So it wasn't a solution that was just for the housing counseling sector, but really could be adopted and used by the broader mortgage finance sector. The key piece here is that we're going to talk about today is piloting the fee-for-service model. So that is testing a standardized set of services to support decline borrowers as well as other borrowers receiving housing counseling, and to measure the value of housing counseling. And I'll talk more about that going forward. And then the next phase of the technology platform is really to do a bit more discovery on what solutions might be out there or be developed that would both aggregate counseling data as well as facilitate more direct connections between lenders and servicers, enabling, again, as one of an important goals, housing counseling agencies to really track the short and long-term outcomes of their clients. So as I said, I'm going to spend time on the fee-for-service pilot in particular. If you want to move, great. So as we were kind of sharing our recommendations for advancing this pilot, we were very fortunately connected with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency's Project Reach initiative, which is designed to reduce the racial wealth gap. They had a working group spearheaded by Wells Fargo that focused on adverse action. So effectively what was happening with borrowers who sought a mortgage and were declined. And their efforts, which focused on how you kind of utilize the housing counseling sector, really aligned with what we were trying to do with the pilots. So we worked together collaboratively, the counseling groups with the Project Reach lenders, to further design the pilot. And I think importantly, work together to navigate some regulatory concerns to help pave the way for the pilot implementation. I think Lott's going to talk about this a little bit more when he speaks, but just to say that there were some continued concerns on the part of the lenders about RESPA. And the group really worked together with the pilots, with support from HUD and with CFPB. And you hopefully saw a recent announcement about a new webpage, which really consolidates the guidance from HUD and CFPB around how to do fee-for-service that works within the context of RESPA. So that is a really important development, both for this pilot, but for fee-for-service model adoption overall. So this pilot is really going to work to provide structured partnerships to assist denied and other potential borrowers with education, counseling from housing counseling agencies. We do want to really focus on keeping declined borrowers on the pathway to homeownership, in part by using things like a warm transfer to a housing counseling agency from a lender. Importantly, to compensate counselors for the work that they do to get borrowers mortgage ready, and to demonstrate how utilizing housing counselors and a fee-for-service model can increase lending to low and moderate income borrowers, as well as borrowers of color. Go to the next slide, please. So the fee-for-service pilot is a targeted effort, which will focus on up to 5 markets to implement the standardized approach to how housing counseling agencies and intermediaries engage with lenders around fee-for-service. So it'll be really one model that is done across markets, lenders, and housing counseling providers. And we know, as Karen said at the beginning, that folks are already doing fee-for-service, and we saw this in the model, but this is designed to really test a specific approach, again, which some of you are already doing, but will really go from the very beginning when you're working with clients all the way through to continue to support them through the mortgage process when they may have questions as they're going through underwriting or closing, as it can be a really overwhelming experience, particularly for first-time home buyers. So the pilot participants will receive training and on the comprehensive service model that I've just talked about, on how to engage with the lenders And importantly to this effort is there will be a lot of data sharing and collection so that we really can evaluate the model's efficacy. As I've said, this is an effort that Unidos is really leading on the pilot implementation as part of this collaborative effort. We're currently working to finalize the lenders and markets, and then we'll select housing counseling agencies. And while this initial pilot is going to be rather small in terms of markets and number of participants, the goal here is to continue to expand it and ultimately to be able to provide data that all housing counseling organizations can look to and point to and when engaging with lenders, and also really critical information and models on processes of how somebody, as those of you who said you don't know where to start, to provide you a little bit of a roadmap for how to do that. So the goal really is to create a replicable model that others can utilize across the sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. That was great. And it's really good to hear that there are these coordinated and collaborative efforts within the industry taking place on this. That's very exciting. Just a question. What was the general consensus regarding standardizing a fee for service based on the lender surveys and interviews that were conducted? What were they saying?
So I think part of this is, what we wanted to address is that it's not always consistent in terms of when you say housing counseling, what that means. Sometimes it is, it is always the basic HUD required level of services, but when you look at the 3 tiers of services, some do more, some do less. And so the idea is if you have particularly a regional or national lender who's operating in different markets and partnering with different housing counseling agencies, to be able to have a consistent expectation of the services. So I think that was one of the important things that we wanted to try and achieve in this pilot, is to increase standardization.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then, we saw the results of the poll, the Mentimeter poll that Claire facilitated. What's your reaction to how people responded?
So I think it is in some ways not surprising, and I think it kind of validates what we're trying to do, which is we know housing counseling organizations do such important work, that they do add value, and that fee for service can be really important, but they don't always have the tools and the data. And I think that is what we are trying to do, this work that we can share with others those large number of people who said they don't know where to start, to give them a roadmap to help them be able to start. But I think it's really exciting for the sector too, that some are doing it, some want to do it, and hopefully more will continue to adopt it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Megan will be back for the audience Q&A portion of this conversation. So thank you, Megan. Lot Diaz is also here from Unidos. Thanks for being here, Lot.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. I'm excited about the conversation.
Absolutely. So, Lot, you've been around these fee-for-service conversations for a long time and know the history. So what's different now versus what's happened in the past?
Yes, fee-for-service in the pre-purchase realm has been around a very long time. I'm sure there's many on the phone, many on this presentation who have had and are a few that have these relationships, and they many times are with housing finance agencies, many times they're local, they're government entities. A few of them are with lenders. And what we believed as an organization back when we started this work many years ago is that on the pre-purchase side, housing counselors, when they prepare a family for sustainable home ownership, it really is a good that is valuable to the lender and should be compensated. And so from the very get-go, back down to the early 2000s, we were doing that. We were trying to get relationships with lenders in place. And we were successful in part in the sense they weren't efficient because the data exchange was very limited. The business practices between lender and HCA was very stodgy at best, is how I would characterize it. But they typically, to avoid RESPA concerns, they typically did like marketing agreements. They would phrase the agreements in different ways. And honestly, they were not very productive. I mean, we must have done 5 or 6 of them that I remember, and they weren't productive because the intimacy in terms of the counselor understanding the lender's product and how they were treating the family through the process was a question and a concern. And the lenders' worries that if they shared too much with them, they'd lose the customer or some version of that. So it was very stodgy, and the underlying principle, though, was, as Megan mentioned earlier, is that the legal departments weren't sure how this fit within RESPA, and that was a major concern and limited adoption broadly, I believe.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And so as the conversations proceed towards creating some industry standards for fee-for-service, that can be something of a heavy lift to implement standards around anything within this industry, certainly, and we've seen that in the past. But what are some of the challenges you would anticipate that would be associated with implementing an industry standard on this?
A couple things I'd mention here. Well, first of all, Megan referred to the regulatory barrier that I think we made tremendous progress in the last 4 months. The idea of allowable referral in mortgage lending is a huge issue and exposes lenders to potential fines from the CFPB if they're breaking acceptable practices. Housing counseling was always in the cracks of all that. They didn't, and literally a group of many folks involved have been advocating, including lender partners from the OCC Project Reach group. Really, we were able to combine ourselves to get more clarity and get and have the CFPB more public on that issue. And on my way of kind of thinking, what was the outcome of that was really what CFPB, I think, acknowledged is that HUD's leadership on this. Remember, back in 2005, HUD did a lender model, HCA lender model agreement guidebook, which kind of set the ground rules for if you're going to do fee-for-service pilot with a lender, you want the partnership to have these features. I think, from my perspective, what CFPB did, it kind of acknowledged that HUD's leadership in that role, and that if you're following HUD's best practice on that, a lender is, then you're safe in entering those partnerships. So that was a huge change, and I think now where that's leading us is really, okay, if the regulatory concern has been alleviated to a large degree, how do we make these things productive, and how do we make them, how do we get lenders to easily, and HCAs participate in these? And I think one of the things that Megan is kind of, what's the expected service delivery mode? And she mentioned the 3 levels of tiers of services, consistent, kind of if a lender partners with an HCA, they're going to get a consistent service level, and it's understood more broadly than just what a specific agency's program is in a particular community. So that consistency and standardization is a big piece. The second one is just data exchange and data management. Privacy issues are a huge concern for any of you who have post-purchase fee-for-service arrangements. You understand to what degree servicers protect data from their clients getting out. So data concerns is a really important issue. But I think the biggest one is really going to be kind of developing processes that both the lender and the HCAs are comfortable with in partnership. That's part of the things HPII is trying to test, meaning stuff like, okay, if I'm an HCA, I'm not used to helping a client go through, help them select a product. How do I do this in a fee for service environment? Am I steering? Am I not doing it? What is my best practice there? And that's one issue. From the lender side, is that, well, if I'm partnering intimately with a nonprofit, there's two things to ask: what's my benefit, right? And they always ask, what's my benefit? And we always tell them, well, if you send a customer to an HCA, you may or may not get them back depending on what products you're offering in a community. But if you don't, there is a chance if you offer good products, you will get that family back as a closed loan. So it's a way, and particularly in our pilot with the denials, we're focused on lenders' denials and kind of transferring over to a local agency in the community. Is that, if you deny them, you lose them anyway. Generally, you never see them again. Here's a chance that you can recover that customer back. In addition to just the benefit, if you do originate a loan with a customer who's gone through an HCA, you know that they're more likely to be a sustainable loan that will be on the books for a very long time. So there's a few issues that I would highlight.
No, that's great. Yeah, building in that added value to the lender, that's huge with this. I also appreciate how you talked about consistency in the delivery of services across agencies is critically important as well. And so would the hope be that, if as a part of standardization and maybe the creation of standard agreements, that all of that would be clarified within those agreements?
Yes, the answer to that would be yes. And more importantly, I missed kind of the elephant in the room, and part of my answers is that it will create a revenue stream that doesn't exist currently for nonprofits, for housing counseling agencies. My target with my own, nothing scientific about it. It's like, I'd like at least 30% of the income that our counseling agency and our network earn to come from fee for service relationships. That kind of, fee for service is a flexible revenue stream in the sense that you have to deliver the service, true, but the budgeting of that money can be a little more flexible in terms of if you need to spend it on marketing, you need to spend it on adding intakes or some other program investment. But either way, without that investment, you can't grow programs, you can't improve programs. And so I think the most important thing about the fee for service is it's interesting in its own right, but it's really the revenue that it could generate for local HCAs is something that would be important for them to kind of grow their programs.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lot. That's a lot of great information. Appreciate your being here. So our final speaker is Sylvia Alvarez from Housing and Education Alliance. Welcome, Sylvia. It's great to have you here to share some of your experience on this topic. Housing and Education Alliance has been a pioneer in the fee-for-service space. So what have been some of the benefits and challenges associated with implementing a partnership agreement with your lenders?
Well, thank you, Karen, for having me here today, because I think I can bring a different perspective than the previous two speakers, because we've been in the trenches and doing this for some time. So the primary benefit is that you are able to fund your agency. We don't need to be shy. What we do does a lot of good, not just for that homeowner, but for the realtor, for the mortgage lender, the title company, and it's a domino effect. So we affect the economy, and we have to understand that what we do, it has a value. What happens if we're not around to provide that service to that client, so that in turn, all of these other domino effects can happen. Having someone that you have nurtured and taken through and made them a homeowner, there is no greater reward than that. And the fees that we would normally charge are actually minuscule compared to some of the other ones that are paid. So in reality, I know I've been there with Lot all the way, helping him and doing what I could to make people and make agencies realize that we have a value. So the first benefit, of course, is going to be you can continue to fund your agency, and having 30% of your income come from what you do as opposed to grants is really a benefit. We don't know how much longer HUD is going to be able to keep funding us, and with all the budget cuts that keep coming down. So we need to be prepared to do this a different way. And I can tell you that when you're working with a client and the lender doesn't want to work with you, then that's a lender that maybe is not as honorable, because sometimes they think of us as a problem, or we're in the middle of this. We're there to make sure that the client understands what they're doing, and that they don't make a mistake. So we have found that good lenders always see the value and the benefit that we bring to the table. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a closed loan, and they wouldn't have a real estate commission, and the title company wouldn't make their fees. We deserve to earn a fee for what we do. Our agency has a contract with 4 different municipalities throughout Tampa Bay and beyond, where we get people not just mortgage ready, but help them with their down payment assistance packages. And they pay very well, from $1,500. And there's a new one coming online that's going to be even more than that. And in addition to that, we've also had a long time relationship with one of the major banks, that anytime that someone turns in one of our certificates, we get paid for that as well. So it's been around. I think that people are, like Lot said, they're hesitant, they're concerned about the regulatory constraints, they don't want to make a mistake. But now I think we've got everyone's blessing, and we really need to start thinking of ourselves as a real valuable asset in a transaction.
Okay, that's great. Sylvia, so just sort of thinking back to how some of these conversations began with your lender partners, any advice or guidance or lessons learned from the negotiations that you all have done to even begin to have these conversations with lenders? How did you all approach that?
It's well, our government contracts, they know the value, so we're okay there. But like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times these lenders don't want us in the transaction. This has changed quite a bit, I would say, over the last 2 or 3 years. The good lenders welcome us in that transaction. I have to say that Lot has really worked very hard in trying to get this done, and it's been his baby for many years. So I'm happy. I'm very happy for all of us that this has happened, because it's been a long time overdue. We have to understand the value that we bring and not be shy about collecting fees. That's the bottom line. And we've had several conversations with other lenders throughout the years. A lot of them didn't work out because of regulatory constraints and fear. We've found that non-bank lenders are much more open to a fee-for-service transaction. They see the value that we bring.
Well, as you think back before you entered into an agreement with a lender, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, I came from the mortgage business. Sometimes I wish I'd stayed there, but as far as what I know now that I didn't know then, is that I guess I had to convince myself that we had a valuable service, and that once you know your value, then it's so much easier to sell it. We change lives. This is what we do. We signed up to change lives, and we do it every day. And there are times that I wonder, why did I do this? But what you get back, we're doing a contest right now with all of our past people that we've helped purchase homes, and we're asking them to send in a letter and a picture of them in front of their house. And what does home ownership mean to me? And how has it changed my life? And I'm telling you, you read these letters, and well, I get emotional when I read them, because we've done a really good thing by the time we get someone to that closing table. I'm proud of what we do. I really, really am. And I feel blessed that I can do this. I can actually help people change their lives. Many never thought they could own a home before. We have a value, and that's what everyone needs to realize. Without us, a lot doesn't move. So
That's fantastic. Absolutely is. So message to the audience and housing counseling agencies in the audience, understand your value. That's wonderful.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
wonderful. So I want to invite Megan and Lot to rejoin us if they would, please. And Claire, do we have any questions from our audience for our speakers?
We do. We have a lot of great questions. Since we have a bit of time, I think it might be good to start with this one, which is a couple of you have kind of alluded to regulatory concerns that lenders may have had in the past, or maybe even now. I'm wondering if maybe, Lot, you might kind of summarize those for the audience so that they understand, what were the barriers and what's the situation now? Oh, I think you're on mute.
So happened already. Sorry about that. I think that we, let me start by saying that we have a resource. We did a summary memo of our conversation, documenting a conversation we had with CFPB that became a very impactful argument with the lenders going forward about what regs reign supreme. But the issue that their lenders were most concerned, well, there's two issues. One was, is it legal for me to accept a referral from a nonprofit after, is that an allowable referral, right? And so there was, and CFPB is the regulator of that, and nobody really wanted to get too much in the weeds with that. The thing that changed was PHH case. That's probably the most impactful element. For those of you, PHH was a large lender, and they had a very, interesting insurance cross-sell model. CFPB called them to carpet. They all went to court. PHH won that case against the CFPB, and one of the outcomes that became true, the conclusion of that is any referral is allowable as long as there is a documental a service being provided at a fair market value. So that cleared the whole referral space. And then secondly, so the second question, what is the fair market value of counseling? And we spent a lot of months going back and forth. And now that with HUD's new NOFO, they're going to attack that, the homeownership NOFO, those of you who know it's come out, it's not come out yet, it'll be coming out shortly, is really going to define that fair market value for pre-purchase counseling. Anyway, so getting to those two elements, the referral piece and the fair market value for service, were the two critical elements that progress was made to allow things to move forward.
Great, thank you. It's really helpful. I guess to kind of continue in that vein, let's see. So here's a question. So this person is saying that what they find difficult with fee for service is that the agency only gets paid at closing. Are there examples of getting paid when someone doesn't close on a home?
So I'm happy to share a little bit about what we're hoping to do with the pilot, and then maybe Lot and or Sylvia can add on, which is this is something that we felt was really important, because really the work that the housing counselor does is to do the work to help get them ready to be prepared for homeownership. And a lot can happen between, whether it's finding the house or an inspection or something else. So under the pilot, the hope is that counseling agencies will actually get paid when the borrower is deemed mortgage ready, which again reflects you've done this work to help them get mortgage ready. But Lot or Sylvia, you may have more to add to that.
My only addition is the reason is because they don't know. I mean, if you're in the lender's shoes, is that they don't know the work that's being. Remember, there's not a whole lot of history in this work with lenders, right? So it's not like everybody knows what's going on and we all know what each other provide and we know the benefit of each other's service. It's not that. This is brand new in a real sense. And so they don't, if they pay for, they don't know if the service is going to have any impact. It's useful. One way they do know that is that in Megan's case, they successfully applied for a mortgage with their bank. They know, oh, counselors did their work really well, or in some cases, lender wanted to do it at closing. So I think it's partly a systemic reason, meaning that lenders don't understand the underneath work or how that works. And so because they have no experience with it, essentially, or most don't. I mean, some people in banks do, but when you get down to the origination staff or loan processors, they're not spending their time in meetings with housing counselors generally. And so they just don't know the value. Our hope is over time, the systemic change of how fees are paid and how the system's funded may change as we demonstrate success in not only in this pilot, but others are doing versions of this too. So we're not the only, HPII is not the only example of this, but as we get more experience, I think the other funding modes may materialize over time. But right now, that's the only way they can assess accountability.
And Sylvia, what's your experience with the timing of payment?
Well, I can tell you that I don't think it's perfect yet for the reasons that were brought up, because we do a lot of work and sometimes they fall through for one reason or another. So there has to be something there for us to cover our work, because otherwise, again, they wouldn't close a loan, they wouldn't sell a house. So I'm hoping, and this is what it was told to me, we need to start somewhere. So this fee, at least at closing, let's prove our worth, let's show what we can do, and then we can come back and renegotiate. So, but without, like it was said, without any real data that we could use and prove to them, I think that the best thing is let's do it, low end, and let's do it this way because that's all that we could get them to take. And then we'll worry about, you closed 100 loans because of us last year. Okay, it's time to discuss this fee that you pay and how you're paying it.
Right. And Karen, just to add something, when we assessed this we did I'm not going to say overly formal survey. I mean, the cost of the way the agencies priced this was anywhere from as little as like $400 to as high as $1,800. And what are you including those costs? I mean, and people spend a lot of time with clients. Some clients are quicker than others. Some clients take more time. How do you assess that? In fact, HUD's NOFO is really asking intermediaries and agencies who are applying for that money to really assess that value full cycle. So we should have more information on pricing, but essentially nobody knows pricing at this point. There's been no experience to really understand that yet.
Exactly.
I'm seeing more questions in the Q&A. Karen, did you have any you wanted to add in first?
There's one in here that I caught my eye. Obviously the focus of these conversations right now are on the lenders, but there are agencies that have other types of partnerships as well, municipalities being one of them. Any thoughts around the future of these conversations as they relate to other partnership arrangements, or perhaps there'll be lessons learned from this work that might be applicable to those other types of relationships? Megan, start with you. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think there are a variety of ways that counseling agencies can work with different partners, whether it's full housing counseling service or providing education. I think Sylvia, mentioned kind of this important step of helping somebody who never realized they could be a homeowner achieve that. So sometimes it's creating the opportunity to help people understand that there is a pathway. But I also want to invite Sylvia, because I think she mentioned specifically agreements she already has with some municipalities.
Yes. And I don't mind sharing this, but we have an agreement with City of Tampa. The City of Tampa is very generous. We love working with them. And we get paid $1,500 for a reservation, not a closing, but a reservation. Then we get $500 when they actually close. So they understand that we're doing all that heavy lifting on the front end, right? There's a new one coming on. It's going to be very similar. I can't say it yet because agreements haven't been signed. That one's going to be actually paying us $2,500. I don't know how the breakdown is going to be. And someone had asked me a question and I couldn't find how to answer it. So I don't have a problem sharing what we actually get paid. We've had a long time relationship with one of the big banks. They have been very good with us. And for every certificate, every home buyer certificate that they have that comes across, and actually this is through the whole country because we have created an online home buyer education course. So we get a $300 from them for every certificate that we taught someone a class. And so we get paid quarterly on that. We also have a contract with Orange County. That one is just for it's for education and counseling, and we get $70 per student that comes through that we work with. But the new contract is coming out, and I have a feeling that that's going to probably go up. So we love working with all of our government partners. They really have been great. So
Thank you for that. Claire, do you have anything else? I think if not, I can ask a few more, I think, that I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, I see this one here about, I think this is maybe important to ask. So there are actually several questions in this person's question, but one of them is asking about steering. Do you only work with those particular lenders and deny services to individuals not working with that lender? So that seems important to clarify.
okay. We work with anyone who comes to us that needs help. We don't turn anyone away. We focus on the LMI community, but we help everyone. During the housing crisis, we even help doctors that were losing their homes. So no one gets turned away at HCA.
I think you're speaking of the lender side, right? Claire, it was a question on lender part, or is it individuals?
No, this person was asking about does the housing counseling agency only work with particular lenders? So
yeah, I think that's a good question. Actually, I think I think any lender can participate who wants to participate. If you have, my goal for the agencies in our network is every one of our agencies will have a fee-for-service relationship with at least 3 lenders in their market. Now, does that mean you can only send business to those 3 lenders? Absolutely not. You send business when they've earned it and the product fits the family's profile. Yep. I always use mortgage bond programs, which are very rare and they last about 3 or 4 months, where somebody's buying down the interest rate. So it's almost any lender who won that contract is going to get the business because they're going to price everybody out of the market. You wouldn't deny a client if that program's available in your community. Nobody's saying that. My thing is, I think every lender you deal with at some level, you should work toward establishing a fee-for-service relationship. So it just becomes a pervasive element of the pre-purchase space for clients that come through HCAs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to take a couple years.
Yeah,
so
you answered the question correctly. I'm sorry, I did not, but it's true. We have sometimes, if the lender doesn't get the client's loan, it's not our fault. Maybe their program needs to be better. So, we, of course, we'll have our 3 that we're working on getting, but by the same token, if someone has something better, they're going to be told about that particular program as well.
So just wanted to add on a couple things to what Lot and Sylvia have already said. So one, it really is about the product, right? And I've had conversations with folks in my network where the lender's a little disappointed. They have a fee for service arrangement, but they're not getting many clients. And the counseling agency observation is, well, if you had better products, you would get more clients. So
Right.
counselors are part of their job, part of the HUD requirements is to make sure they're showing them multiple products and encouraging them to look at what is best suited for them. So I think when Lot talks about kind of relying on HUD as the experts in it, that is a requirement of HUD counseling. So if you're doing that, that is part of how you avoid steering. And I think there are other practices that you can adopt that will make sure you're documenting those things, right? So you can show as you should do, but you can also have clients sign that, yes, they've received these different product offerings, which can include fee for service and non-fee for service lender products. So I think there are different ways to make sure you are documenting that you are giving clients choice, because that's fundamentally what it is about. It is giving clients different options and choices in terms of the product that they select that works best for them.
Well, here's a bit of, I guess, a flip side of this whole conversation we're having right now, in that someone brings up the issue of exclusivity as it relates to lender partnerships and is inquiring around whether lenders are permitted to have exclusive fee-for-service partnerships. In other words, this individual encountered a lender who refused to accept a homebuyer education certificate from another agency because they already had another lender partner. So another agency partner. So there's that kind of activity that is happening and potentially might continue to happen. I don't know, but any thoughts on that or any perspective anyone can bring to that?
I will say, I'll start, and I'm sure others have. I think that, first of all, in the HUD model agreement, it clearly states that there is no quid pro quo from the lender to the agency if they sign an agreement. So there is no, technically there cannot be you have to send me clients if I sign this agreement. So just to be clear on that. But the question to me is like, and I think Sylvia said it many times, there are good lenders and not good lenders. And a good lender wants to compete on the merits of their product and the better merits of their service. And we want to give those lenders the opportunity to work with agencies because families will benefit over time. I think this is, again, I can't reiterate, this is not a common practice. It's not out, there's not 20,000 partnership agreements out there yet. There will be one day, right? And the key thing, and that's why I think HUD's guidance on this was so critical, it really is guiding the nature of the relationship. As an HCA, your thing is just honor the principles that are there, and they're not different from the principles you practice almost every day of your life anyway. It's important to not lose sight of that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Claire, I see one more sort of thread that's happening here with respect to rural markets. One participant is saying, do you think this will work in a rural market? Our rural lenders just seem to have the mindset of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so thoughts there when you have a lender who's prominent in the area and they're just stubborn, if you will, in terms of wanting to negotiate these types of agreements. Any thoughts there, Sylvia or others?
When the question that you're asking is, how can we tell them that we have a value? Is that what we're asking?
Well, they're concerned about how it'll work with rural markets. You know, perhaps there's a culture within rural markets among lenders in particular, where
Well,
they just, you know,
I
it's
can tell you,
working.
I have not experienced that here.
Okay.
The lenders that we work with, it doesn't really matter to them whether they're rural or not. You know, so, and that really is a non-issue for me. I don't know if anyone else on the call can speak to that, but we've had great,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, really, I have no issues with whether it's rural or urban, none.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that I think any partnership, starting with any partnership in a rural, if you can get a lender to do that, and it doesn't have to be the dominant lender in a particular market, it can be any lender who you think has good products and will work with you effectively.
Exactly.
You know, I get just new practices change up, you know, kind of how people operate over time. And I think it's just you know, starting somewhere and then seeing where that leads you to as time goes on.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Claire, maybe one more question, and then I'll ask and make some inquiries with our speakers about next steps.
Yeah. So I think some folks are asking, well, so if the lender is giving the housing counseling agency a fee, isn't that just going to get passed on to the home buyer? So do you have maybe kind of see who seems most excited for this lot, maybe?
Well, I get this a lot, and I think Sylvia said it, alluded to this a couple times. There is value. They earn what, I don't know, what is it, 8,000? Let's just use that number per loan, right? That gets cut up for everybody. The point is that the idea here is that the value that HCAs are generate become part of the profit margin that typically results from a loan. So it's part of the in the business, they say that you manufacture loan. It's part of the manufacturing process and it costs X, right? So no, the point is that they're going to be, if it doesn't go to us, it'll go to the originator, it'll go to someone else in the transaction. It's not adding necessarily a burden on the client, although the lenders would love it if we could do that.
Agreed. That is, that's so correct, Lot. I mean, that's a big pie that they have to split up. And why shouldn't we get a piece of that pie for doing all the work to get them so they can eat that pie?
Okay, great. So I know we recognize that this is a work in progress, but is there a proposed timeline for implementation of the pilots and the other activities that are planned? Lot, Megan, either one of you have a comment related to that?
Well, I'll start because I've been, as Megan alluded, our organization's kind of coordinating the implementation of the fee-for-service pilot at HPII. So we have a few lenders who are participating. We just are getting the markets solidified this month. In fact, I was working on an email to the immediate partners about how that's going to you know, kind of how we're going to do this in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So it's starting, HPI pilot's just starting to come online. That has all the pilot features of collecting data and those kinds of things. So that is like, you're in the last, probably, if I'm lucky and I'm not too optimistic, within 4 weeks we should have launched something in 3 markets at least. But in addition to that, Sylvia and some of our other agencies in our network, we have a couple other pilots going on from different lenders, not part of HPII, but have the same fee-for-service structure. And they're just starting to come online now. So it's still literally, when I'm not lying when I'm just saying, for us, in terms of what I call the modern fee-for-service, I'll just call it the modern fee-for-service model, was birthed 4 months ago and is just starting to get traction in terms of how it's implemented, and a lot of experiential praxis by HCAs and lenders. So it's just starting, but they are starting. And that's the ones I know of. There could be others going on that we don't know about. And
Okay.
so I'd say it's time is now, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. Thank you all. This has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but again, thank you for being here and sharing this status update. We hope that this information has been valuable for our audience. So with that, again, thank you. And I'll turn it back to Claire for some additional information and to close us out today.
Great. Thanks, Karen, and thanks to all the speakers. So we are just want to plug again the networking platform, Eventory. Haven't decided how to say that yet. Eventory by 6Connects. So you should have the link in your email. You can message folks directly, so other attendees, other speakers at the conference. You can also check out, who the speakers are, see their profiles, and then you've got the agenda, and we've got a couple discussion boards in there. David's Corner, if you have any questions for the Deputy Assistant Secretary. We've got a resources channel, and I think we've got a discussion possibly for this session and the counselor certification one. So be sure to check that out. And then coming up today, we have 2 concurrent sessions. So there's one that is about the updated guide to choosing a CMS, which was just released today by Housing Action Illinois. So they're going to talk a little bit about recent developments with CMS systems and go through their guide for agencies looking for a new one or looking to choose one. And then we'll also hear from HUD certified counselors. So kind of celebrating you all, the certification process, and hearing about the impact of it on counselors and agencies. And then to close out the day and the conference, you'll hear from leaders in the Office of Housing Counseling, some of their reflections on the conference and other topics of interest to housing counseling agencies. So thanks again for joining. You can keep in touch on the website, on the HUD Exchange, by emailing housing.counseling@hud.gov, and then, of course, by subscribing to Housing Counseling Today. Thanks again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you the rest of the day.